just coming off the elections in the United States. So much is going on in geopolitical maneuvering. Today's newspapers, on the front page, you see the picture of a building in flames in Gaza. Troops are being mounted at the border. All kinds of demagogues are facing rebellions and opinions of the masses that they are unable to resist anymore. And sometimes they run from the arms of a lion into the arms of a bear. The media may give it the appendage called spring. Who knows what all these things really mean? We like to taint them and paint them in ways where we seem to reveal this vulnerability that we all have, that our hope is ultimately in political leadership. It's fascinating to me that when the Old Testament people move from the Exodus to the times of the judges and on to the kings, you begin to see what Martin Luther meant when he said, history is like a drunken man reeling from one wall to the other, knocking itself senseless with every hit. It used to be maybe in the mid-40s or 60s or something, the Dickensian phrase could have been brought to the fore, you know, the best of times and the worst of times. But it seems to be quite appropriate almost at any time. What is history really all about? Is it really an accumulation of multiple biographies? Or is it, like Henry Ford said, just a lot of bunk? What is history all about? It was some years ago that I recall being in Amman, Jordan. My wife, my colleagues, and I, we'd just gotten off the plane and we were heading to do some sightseeing when somebody from the palace called and asked if we would come by to pay a quick visit. We were really in our very casual clothes, and we told them that. And Prince Raj said, "That's all right. I'd like to have a few minutes with you before you begin the meetings." I never met the gentleman. He's the last heir to the throne in Iraq, in Jordan. And we sat down across, and not knowing what kind of conversation to make with a man of his stature, I just looked at him and I said, Your Highness, I said, what do you think is the greatest need in this part of the world? He's a very well-thinking man and very soft-spoken. He said, it is the same need in any part of the world. Two things, he said, leadership and youth. The world is desperately in need of leaders, he said, and the youth are desperately in need of watching good models of leadership. And if we fail in those two areas, he said, there is no great hope for the future of this world. Leadership and youth. Remember the story, the words penned by Percy Bysshe Shelley. But maybe before I read that to you, let me turn to the scriptures and then at least give you the theoretical backdrop, the historic backdrop on which I want to base my message. 2 Kings 21. Manasseh has just succeeded his father Hezekiah, who had reigned for about 29 years. And Manasseh is going to take the reins now for 55 years. See what it says about him. He was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 55 years. That's 2 Kings 21. His mother's name was Hephzibah. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, following the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. He rebuilt the high places his father Hezekiah had destroyed. You notice that one line? He rebuilt the high places his father Hezekiah had destroyed. He also erected altars to Baal and made an Asherah pole, as Ahab king of Israel had done. He bowed down to all the starry hosts and worshipped them. He built altars in the temple of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, in Jerusalem, I will put my name. In both courts of the temple of the Lord, he built altars to all the starry hosts. He sacrificed his own son in the fire, practiced sorcery and divination, and consulted mediums and spiritists. He did much evil in the eyes of the Lord, provoking him to anger. Well, 55 years after his reign came to an end in an amazing way, in the last few months of his reign, he repented, tried to undo all that he had done. It was a bit too late to change the course of the nation. He was succeeded by his son Amon, who reigned for just 2 years. And then after Amon came Manasseh's grandson, Josiah. And in chapter 22 it says this, Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 31 years. His mother's name was Jedidah, daughter of Adaiah. She was from Bozkath. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and walked in all the ways of his father David, not turning aside to the right or to the left. Remember the words of Shelley? I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "To vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that the sculptor well those passions read, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is OZYMANDIAS, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains round that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." Nothing beside remains round that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. If you go to those desert terrains today, you'll see many a broken statue of a one-time demagogue, and the sculptor well those passions read, and those expressions still remain on these broken and stone-made things. I think it was the words of Samuel Taylor Coleridge that often come to mind. He says this, "If men could only learn from history what lessons it might teach us, but passion and party blind our eyes, and the light which experience gives us is a lantern on the stern which shines only on the waves behind us." And the light which experience gives us is a lantern on the stern which shines on the waves behind us. Or the famous aphorism of Santayana, "He who refuses to learn from history is forced to repeat its mistakes." Take a look at these two historical panels here. Two men taking the nation in two different directions, and it started with some extraordinary decisions they themselves made. Manasseh from 697 to 642 before Christ, following on the heels of a father who had ushered in one of the greatest revivals the people had ever known. How does this happen? How does it happen that you could be raised at a time in history where you see the blessing and prosperity that results from piety, that results from getting yourself aligned with the will of God, that some young upstart comes and wants to change everything, think they've got something unique to give, some brand of leadership that previous generations did not know or do not know. And here he came, having inherited all of that. How is it somebody put it? First piety begat prosperity, and then the daughter divorced the mother? How piety begat prosperity, and then the daughter divorced the mother? You get blessed as you walk in stride with God, and then that strange shift comes in imagining that this came about because of some great extraordinary strength you yourself had, and you're going to do it alone. Nations are on that precipitous edge right now. I cannot believe that in North America, the average person has not yet seen, who is a skeptic, that all that has befallen, the lifestyle and the so-called fiscal cliff that we face and so on, has come about from abandoning the very principles that had guided for a long time the strength that the nation had. Those undergirding ideas have been tossed to the winds. And so terribly shaken now, financially, morally, spiritually, in families, till we do not know how to define the most fundamental questions of life. What does it mean to be human? What does marriage mean? What does sexuality mean? You ask an average university student, they're all at sea with these definitions. And we see, looking at leadership, going up without chart or compass, and yet making all kinds of arrogant promises to the populace.